In a moment, I will introduce you to our guest, Jeremiah Peoples. But before we do that, get through some housekeeping and make a couple of announcements regarding the intro phase and phase one. Just as a reminder, the intro phase ends on Friday, this Friday, November 25th. Please take advantage of the relaxed rules if necessary, so you can get your coursework done by Friday. If you are not able to finish the intro phase by Friday, and yes, you have all day Friday to complete the coursework, then unfortunately, we won't be able to move on to phase one of the program. You can, however, remain on the Slack channel. You can communicate with our participants, attend our town halls. You just wouldn't be able to move on to phase one or have access to the Moodle. And we have to do that in order to differentiate between who remains in the cohort and who does not. When it comes to the survey, I know there was a lot of questions about the survey and choosing your track. If you chose a track, either full stack or UX, you are set for when phase one starts. However, if you chose both or never received a survey, then at that point, you should be in contact, a tutor should be in contact with you. If you do not hear from a tutor by Wednesday, this Wednesday, in 2 days, then please do reach out to a tutor. That is anyone with the blue check mark next to their name. All right, so without any further ado, I would love to welcome Jeremiah today. Jeremiah is a veteran who served 6 years in the Air Force. He started his self-teaching journey when he was deployed 3 years ago. He's currently a content creator and senior developer advocate for Slack. And one of Jeremiah's passions is helping others break into tech. Welcome, Jeremiah.
Thank you, and thanks for the intro. Happy to be here.
Nice to have you. So we are going to, I guess, just start with the basics, how all of this happened for you. How did you get into tech? Because we do know it was a self-taught journey. So maybe talk a little bit about your beginnings. And just on a personal note, I remember as a participant last year seeing you in our town hall. I think it was like our second town hall. And there have been so many changes since last year to this year in your journey. So excited to hear all about that. So
sounds good.
Just give us a start. How did you decide tech was for you, since you did not go to school for computer science?
Right. So my journey started when I was, again, deployed in the Air Force. I realized right then and there that I didn't really want to do 20 years in the Air Force, but that meant I had to do something else. And I did take like a HTML course back in high school, like a long time ago. And I was like, the coding thing was pretty fun. It might be a real job. So I looked into it and I saw a content creator by the name of Chris Sean break into tech without a degree. And that was the first that I saw that it was a possibility to start a career in tech without having like a computer science background. So after seeing that and like the lifestyle of someone in tech, I decided to pick up a couple courses and pursue the web development career field. I was planning on studying like while I had my last 3 years in the military, but I was able to transition out of my full-time job as like a map analyst in the military into another division that was like a software development division. So with like a super little knowledge of just front end work, I transitioned to become a front end developer for my military unit. And then from there, I was just able to get my foot in the door of a lot of different places. So after that, I went to VMware in Los Angeles, and that's where I learned a ton of things via pair programming. And I learned test-driven development, React, Kotlin, so many things on the job. And that's where I became a full stack developer. I was creating a satellite application to move satellites around. So that was super fun. And while I was out there, that was 2020. And I was like, this is a good time to start my content creating career because it was 2020 and I was locked inside in a new place. So I picked up a camera. Actually, it was just my phone. And I started recording like, hey, this is the course that I took to get my foot in the door. This is what I've learned working with VMware and pair programming. And through that, I realized that I really enjoy content creation a lot, and I enjoy connecting with developers and putting them on game and teaching them how to break into tech. And that's actually when I found out that developer advocacy was also a job to where you could essentially help people in their software development journey, either use your company software, break into tech, do a lot of different things. So after that, I decided that I was going to try to pursue a career as a developer advocate. So my last year in the military was just trying to prepare myself, my resume, polish up my coding skills and my content creation, community building skills to now break into tech as a senior developer advocate at Slack. Did I miss anything? Did I cover all the points?
That's amazing. First of all, congratulations on that new Slack position. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but it looks like your screen is frozen.
Oh, I thought it was me.
Or is it just, oh, there we go. Okay, that looks way better. So that's awesome. I think you were studying while you were deployed for a little bit, right? So you would be
Correct.
working 12 hours out in the military. And again, thank you for your service in the armed forces. But yeah, that's a lot to handle to do your 12-hour job and then spend some time coding on the side. Can you explain a little bit about that time?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of nice. I know that some people struggle with the discipline part of self-taught, but I was kind of forced into discipline as I couldn't really do much when you're deployed. There is your work, and then after your work, you can lift, and that's about it. So instead of just lifting and like watching Netflix on really slow Wi-Fi, I decided to try to pick up a different skill just because I had the time and it was a passion that I wanted to pursue.
That's awesome. And I did want to touch upon the Web Developer Bootcamp. I think it's, that course by Colt Steele. It's one of the first courses I took when I first got started. And I think it's an excellent course. Colt Steele is a great teacher. And I'm a big proponent of trying to learn things from various resources. Just because we're here in a boot camp doesn't mean that you can't still pull from other resources. And I think maybe hearing things multiple ways from different people kind of helps solidify some of these topics, especially early on when, you're hearing things for the first time, like what is a Boolean, like what's conditional logic and all this stuff. So what are some other maybe resources that you used early on to help you start learning programming on your own?
Yeah, and I also just want to double up on what you said, which I also preach a lot, which is figure out your best learning style. I actually did try to go to college in like 2015 for a CS degree, and I just didn't like the setting, so I promptly dropped out. But then, so I knew I didn't like to go to college. That wasn't my environment that I learned the best. I picked up a book. I took it out to Iraq with me, and I was flipping through the pages, and I was like, this isn't quite for me. And then I finally fell upon like video tutorials where I could follow along and try my own thing. And that for me was what really worked best. So yeah, outside of that, if college works for you, that's amazing. That's a great way. If boot camps work for you, that's amazing. But it all boils down to figuring out your learning style and then just kind of repeating that process and using that learning style to learn stuff.
Absolutely. And while you were out there, did you also build projects? And if so, how did you? I know a lot of students struggle with like, how do I even come up with project ideas and what do I build to learn? Because I know learning, one of the best ways to learn is to put whatever videos you're using or books into use and actually build projects. So how do you come up with those?
Yeah, so for my first couple of projects, I did the projects that were in the Udemy course, which was fantastic. I get a lot of people asking me like, hey, I can't figure out a project. Well, there's tons of projects ideas already out there. That's like a whole different skill to come up with an app and market it and make sure it's tested and make sure it's a good product. That's probably not the skill you're trying to practice on. You're trying to practice on like putting code together to make a thing. So that's why I always recommend clones like Twitter clones, Netflix clone, Facebook clones are a great place to start because you know what you're building towards. It's just up to you to put it together instead of trying to like create the whole idea from scratch. So yeah, either make a clone from a popular website or a course that you go through may present some projects that you can build.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think on that course there was something called Yelp Camp. It was like a Yelp style clone for campgrounds.
There
Did you
was
build
Yelp
that on that?
Camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Yelp Camp, and then there was a guess the color picker. It would like scramble a RGB color set, and you have to find it and use JavaScript, HTML, and CSS to make that
Right.
happen. So there's a lot of cool projects that were in that course.
Yeah. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript are kind of the first technologies that are introduced in that course. What would you say you struggled with the most in the beginning? I know for some people they hate CSS and they love JavaScript, and other people it's vice versa. What about for you?
I liked HTML, I like CSS, I like JavaScript. React, when I started to switch over and work with VMware, they use React. I've never used React.js before. So it was really different and hard for me to pick up the complete architecture that was way different from building in vanilla JS. So that was probably the hardest thing I had to learn.
Yeah, I think a good solid fundamentals on JavaScript help with learning React, because React is a JavaScript framework at the end of the day. I think some people try to transition to React too soon without those solid
Yeah,
JavaScript fundamentals. But yeah,
it was interesting working with like some of like the mid-level to senior level engineers, and I was like, hey, I know how that's probably working underneath the hood because I'm so comfortable with JavaScript. So I was able to not only pull information and pull value from like my senior engineers that I was pair programming with, but I was also able to like provide some helpful information to them as well, which felt good as a super junior person in tech.
that's awesome. And sorry to hijack, Lorraine.
Oh,
I'm gonna
no,
be
you got this.
popping in and asking all the technical details when it comes up.
Absolutely. You mentioned pair programming. Can you explain a little bit more of what that actually is? And is that something that we normally see at a job when somebody's starting off as a junior developer?
Sure. Well, pair programming first is where two engineers kind of side saddle. So they're working on the same problem together. There is two roles, one's a driver and one's a navigator. So for example, if I was going to work on a project with Alex, he might be my navigator and he'll be like, hey, why don't you attack the problem this way and try coding it this way? And I as a driver would try to implement that. And what that does is I'm allowed to pull from, in this example, Alex's expertise and use my expertise to create a solution. And what that helps with is making sure that you're not coding bugs. Instead of like submitting your code, you can like check your code quality as you go, which makes it faster. It depends on company to company if you pair program full-time, pair program part-time, or pair program not at all. So it's up to the company. The difference is that with pair programming, you get that rapid ability to check for code quality right from the get-go, so you can push with confidence. Whereas most companies, they typically have their engineers submit their code through GitHub and have the engineer review their code at a later date instead of Azure coding.
And interestingly, some interviews are conducted that way as well. I've had some interviews that were just a pair programming session where I was the one coding and they were the ones telling me, and vice versa. I had one where I was the one telling them what to code, and that was a little interesting. But yeah, it's interesting to see that they do implement that in interviews as well.
Yeah, pair programming gives you a bunch of soft skills that are super helpful in a lot of different aspects of code. It helps you vocalize what you're thinking, which is super helpful because when you're working on any type of software, you're working with other people. And if you can communicate that out of your mouth as well as on the keyboard, that's super beneficial and helps like become a team.
Exactly. And I think it's a good way to kind of get a sense of the type of person that you are and maybe how well you can gel with the team that you're applying for.
Right.
So if you could think back to your beginning days when you first you learned your self-teaching, you learned, I believe you said it was a couple months of learning. You were granted this opportunity through the Air Force to, continue this path. How did you feel? Because I'm just trying to put myself in those shoes. I feel like I would just be so nervous. How much do I know compared to someone else? I know we talk about imposter syndrome here often as well. I mean, I guess it's the benefit of the pair programming must have been nice, but even with that, did you have any of those feelings or discomforts the first time, you know, in this new position?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I had two first jobs in the military. The one was like with the Air Force. And then I felt like completely overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do. I remember like my first starter project to get familiar with the code base took me about 3 weeks to complete. And then my senior engineer came over and basically did that whole entire project in 5 minutes. And I felt terrible. And I kept comparing myself to him. And after a while, he just sat me down and was like, don't worry about it. I've been coding for 20 years. I don't expect you to like be able to code at my same level because I have 20 more years of experience than you do. So that was a realization. And I thought that I would only have to go through imposter syndrome one time, but then I went to Space Force in Los Angeles to work with VMware, and they were on a different level. I had to learn a whole bunch of technologies, Kotlin, React, MySQL, GraphQL, and that is where I felt imposter syndrome again. But I had to remind myself again that these people also have 20 years of experience and I have like a year at this point. So not to hold myself to too high of a standard and work on learning, but not like competing with my peers.
I love that. I have a friend that works for Microsoft, and he messaged me on LinkedIn the other day. He said, I had this bug that I was working on for like 4 hours and could not figure it out. And the senior developer came in and figured that out in 5 minutes. But sometimes it's just, it comes down to their familiarity also with the code base. Some of these code bases are so big and so vast, and it just really takes time to get familiar with that code base, to know, especially if it's not documented super well, to know where everything's at, how everything works behind the scenes. So we have to remind ourselves not to beat ourselves up over those things, even though sometimes we may not feel like we're smart enough. That's usually never the case. It's just, you know, these people, like you said, sometimes have 20 years on us and experience. And that's part of the reason why they can do these things that fast. And the best thing we could do is just to be a sponge and learn from them.
Absolutely. And I also had to remind myself, like the people that were hiring me, the people that welcomed me into their code base, they're smart people as well. And if they trust me to work on code with them, they probably have some inclination like, hey, this will most likely work out. We know what we're talking about. So trust the people that hired you on. They definitely saw something in you if they took a chance on you.
That's great. Yeah, I love that.
I apologize. I'm going to make another quick announcement. I apologize. In an effort to make everyone's life easier, I posted a link for the Zoom in the email and in Slack, and not realizing it was my own personal link. So those of you who see yourselves as Lorraine, if you would like, it would be appreciated if you hover over your name or my name, and click the three dots towards the middle. There'll be a selection for renaming. And then you can actually put your name, and you could rename yourself your actual name. So there's not 1,000 of me in this call. So I apologize. It was my attempt to be helpful and it completely backfired. All right, I apologize. All right, let's continue. Okay, so still going back to your beginning days, can you tell us what it was like a day in the life of?
Sure. So all days typically started with a 10 to 15 minute stand up. And at the stand up for my team, we would have our product managers there, our designers, and then our engineers. And we would just give a brief update of, hey, yesterday I worked on the profile login page. I have no blockers and it should be done on time, and so on and so forth. After that, we would typically pick a card or a story. These are little bits of features that engineers can work on, whether it be front end, back end. We would just pick one that we felt like would be good for us in our career. Then we would understand the feature and then work on creating it. And that was the coding part of the job, pretty straightforward there. But the non-coding parts of the job that were unexpected to me was being in meetings where you would plan the iteration. So you'd plan the features and stories that you were getting to create. And also like just meeting with your team bonding, those are super important. I didn't think that a company of that size would invest so much in like making sure people could connect to each other. But at the end of the day, we're just humans working with each other to create something. So those were also important times of just like 15 minutes of game time a week to help figure out who your peers are that you're gonna be working with 8 hours a day.
Were you working remote at this time or in person?
This was during the pandemic. So the first 2 months of that schedule was in person, and the last 4 months of that schedule was remote, but it pretty much resembled the same structure.
Gotcha.
Another thing I know, well, one of the first videos last year that I saw of you, and it's how I discovered Reskill myself, was a video of you talking about being a Black man in tech, and also being a self-taught Black man in tech. And, you know, if you look at the statistics, the numbers for us, you know, people of color, Hispanic, Black, and other, you know, they're pretty low still. So have you been seeing a trend in the change or any, I remember you mentioned in one of your videos, like, I think your first job, you were like the only one. Are we seeing a trend? I know the percentages are still low, but I'm hoping that the trend, and that's part of Reskill's goal here as well, is get more people of color in tech. So anything to say about that or your experiences on that?
First up, I encountered a lot of hate about like being a self-taught African-American person in tech, but through my experience of like working in industry for a few years, those hate comments were only like internet trolls. Everyone that I've had the opportunity to work with in person is very open-minded and supportive and celebrates our differentiness, which is amazing. And as far as the community of like historically underrepresented people in tech, I'm seeing a change in the right direction as companies are realizing that if they want a product that is a global product, they have to have people that represent the globe in their companies. So where I work now, I definitely see a lot of people that aren't white males in places of authority, leading meetings, and it's really great to see that where I work, and I feel very comfortable and included.
It's great to hear. We need to increase the numbers, right?
Right.
What do you like? What's the best part of tech? Before we get into your new role of an advocate, so before this, what was your best? What was the thing that you could brag about with being in tech now and having this new career?
The thing that I could brag about, I mean, I'm probably not bragging about the right things, but just the lifestyle that comes with tech is really a blessing to me. Coming from the military, you can imagine there's not much of a lifestyle that most people enjoy. Wake up early, go to physical training, go to deployments whenever someone asks. But transitioning like a complete 180 into tech, there was time to play games. There was team bonding exercises. There was ping pong events. There was catered lunches. There was the ability to work remote and to grow your career. Like that's not going to hurt you if you're remote. It's going to increase the amount of jobs you can work for. So that's probably the most exciting and thing that I enjoyed most about being in tech was the lifestyle that comes with it. It's also cool to see things that like are in the world that you've created. So like if you create, I'm having a hard time because I did a satellite application. So people would look up and be like, oh, am I frozen? Am I good to go?
There you
Yeah,
go.
you're frozen for a little bit. I couldn't tell if you were done talking.
I was saying that it's nice to see what you've created in the world and people getting value from it.
There's nothing wrong though with enjoying the lifestyle and the catered lunches and all that nice, beautiful work-life balance as well.
So much better than marching. Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, I can imagine. So now let's transition into your newest role, which is a developer advocate. Can you, I mean, I literally just Googled that in like an hour ago. So can you explain what that is and how you came about getting this position?
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't know it was a job until like a couple months before I started to really plan my transition out of the Air Force. It's essentially what I like to do most, which is help developer communities. So a developer advocate is a person who educates a developer community about their company's product, their APIs, SDKs, CLIs, and so on and so forth. And they can do that in a lot of different ways. So they can do that with content creation, blog posts, going to conferences. At the end of the day, as long as they're helping a developer out in their journey, they're doing their job. So for me specifically, I am obviously inclined to making video content as I see the scale of how many people it can impact. So that's what I'm working on at my day job as a developer advocate, is creating content where people can ingest and understand how to use our APIs, SDKs, CLIs, and so on and so forth.
Is most of this content public facing, or is some of it internal for employees of Slack and maybe other people who consume Slack technologies and the APIs and whatnot?
I'd say it's about 70% externally facing, as our developer community is anyone who picks up a Slack CLI and wants to play around and create a Slack app. So mostly I'm helping people outside of Slack create, but oftentimes I'm doing an internal workshop of getting people up to speed on the newest Slack tools.
Got you. So I'm assuming it's probably back-end heavy coding that you're involved in when it comes to the work that you're doing there at Slack, and explaining like how to use APIs and how to use some of these technologies that you use, or would you say some of it is front end?
I'd say a healthy mix of both. I've interviewed with like a bunch of different companies and developer relation jobs, and most of it boils down to like using their SDKs. So it's not necessarily back end or front end. It's just knowing essentially Python or JavaScript and how to leverage an API. So while we have tools that work with JavaScript, Java, and Python, if you know any one of those, you'll be good to go and be able to use our suite of tools, as well as other companies' suite of tools for the most part.
Gotcha. I know that in a video you explained that you took several months to prepare for these interviews, and in some cases you might not have known what exactly you had to prepare for. So it could have been like leak code, data structures, and algorithms, and other things. Can you explain that process and how you tackled that massive undertaking?
Right. Yeah, so Facebook was the first company that reached out to me when I was like just getting started. They're like, hey, I know you have 2 years left in the military, but we think you could be a good fit here in 2 years. And I'm like, okay, well, that's terrifying because I just figured out what React is. So from that point, I started studying data structures and algorithms, because that's the software engineering interview process for larger tech companies. So I would do a lot of leak code problems. I took another course in data structure and algorithms on Udemy by Colt Steele. And that's how I was prepping for the majority of my time. But when it came to like applying and getting interviews for developer advocacy, it was just a wide range of things. So for one interview, I had to create a podcast and talk to the CEO about data warehouses. For another, I had to do leak code. For another, I had to give a presentation about something technical like I would on the job. So there is a wide variety of job interviews when you are in developer relations. But at the core of it all, knowing how the internet works, how a specific language works, and being able to articulate that is what is helpful.
And that's quite a lot to study for. So how did you go about studying for data structures and algorithms? I know that you took the course by Colt Steele, and I also took that one. I'm a big fan of Colt Steele
awesome.
and his courses. But I mean, studying data structures and algorithms is tough, and it requires a lot of practice. And I would just love to hear how you tackled that.
I don't think I had the best approach to it. So the first thing I tried to do was like what I do when I always look to change or accomplish something. I look for someone who was very successful in doing it, because I'm never the first to do anything. So I went on YouTube, and again and again and again, people are just saying leak code premium is worth it, and just do the top 100 problems. So that was essentially everything I did. I got leak code premium, which was like $30 a month. And then I started working my way through the easies, the mediums, and making sure to hit all of the major topics like graphs and linked lists and so on.
Right. And some of these questions are really tough. So when you would encounter a question where you're like, okay, I've already been here for 10, 15 minutes and I still have no idea where to start. What was your process then? Would you look up a YouTube video? Would you look up some written content on how to solve that particular problem?
Yeah. So for the first month that I was trying LeetCode, I would try for 15, 20 minutes. And if I didn't get it, I would look for the answer in the language that I was comfortable with, which is JavaScript. But a super helpful tip that I got from some random YouTube video that I was watching was to look at the solution in a language that's not your own, so that you don't memorize the perfect syntax, but you understand how the problem is being broken down. So that way you don't feel like you're completely cheating yourself. You're like, okay, I gotta get what they're doing. I'm gonna try to make that my own solution. And by kind of transpiling that to your own language, it kind of cements it in your brain a bit better.
I love that. I've never heard that tip before, and I think that's great because when you're looking at a different piece of code, you're kind of having to translate it into like pseudocode in your head to then be able to write it in the language that you're comfortable in. And I think when you're studying these LeetCode problems, if you can come up with a solution in pseudocode in plain English, that's the hardest part. Then you just, translate that into JavaScript or whatever language you're doing, and then you're fine. But if you can explain the process of solving that issue in the plain English, you're like 90% there in my book. And some of these whiteboarding interviews, you might not even have to write the code in full. They just kind of want to hear you explain the steps in process. So I think that's a great tip. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And then especially like what you said, pseudocoding is super helpful, and like just being able to talk through it. Interviewers know that you're stressed out. You're probably not going to code your best while you're in an interview setting. So being able to articulate how you break down problems gives them a better insight to how you would break down this problem, and not being like, oh, he knows how to solve LeetCode problem 187 really well. Great job. Like if you complete the problem perfectly, but don't communicate at all, you probably won't pass the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super important. And LeetCode Premium has solutions, and I think a few different languages like C++, Java, maybe JavaScript. I can't remember. But that would, for those of you that are wondering if you should get LeetCode Premium, and I think it's worth it. And then you can look at the solutions in Python if you're a JavaScript person, and then, do as you said, translate that to your own language and whatnot. Some of the solutions there are pretty good.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely an investment. But if you take that investment and apply it to the job that you may get, it usually is worth it if you use it correctly.
Absolutely.
You mentioned earlier when you first started working with the designers. So sometimes I feel we neglect our designers that we have here that are going to get started. So any experience with working with designers or advocating for designers as well, or is it just developers? Anything you can give us on that?
Yeah, so when I worked, I came here to be in the spot. When I was working with VMware, I expected to do pair programming with other developers, but I did not expect to do pair creating with other designers, which was super beneficial to me because I was able to get a little bit of insight into how they curate and how they communicate. What developers hate most is wasting time. So learning how engineers and designers can communicate effectively was super important. And you only get that if you talk to a designer every once and again, so that you can understand, okay, this is what they want. This is what their design means. If their design is wrong here, 99% of the time you can infer that it's X, Y, and Z. So being able to sit with and understand designers is super helpful in just reducing some of the friction of going back and forth.
Oh, that's great. And eventually we'll have an opportunity to do teamwork where we will have the designers working with the developers, and a part of that communication is going to happen, because that was my experience. I was like, I don't know if my button is correct in this position, but you guys let me know. And then we just had a lot of communications in order to learn what works best for everyone.
Yeah, it's a learning process. Like sometimes we're definitely talking different languages, like both literally in JavaScript and Figma. We're definitely talking different languages, but if you can come to a common understanding of, hey, we're working together, this is what I mean by this is what you mean by that, it just makes the process of building stuff so much easier.
Absolutely. We have a participant question asking, and please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. They want to know what made you decide to document your journey before working in tech.
Well, it was a bit selfish and kind of like a side passion project. So I've always wanted to make a YouTube channel, and I always wanted to get into tech. And the video that I saw was Chris Sean, and he broke into tech and he documented his journey into tech, and that also helped him when he was looking for jobs. So I was like, maybe if I show that I'm a person, I'm out here working, I'm grinding, it will give me a little bit of an edge over people who maybe don't have their whole entire path into tech online. And it did. So that was helpful.
I think, is he also a developer advocate right now?
He is. Yeah, he's at a data company.
All right, well, we'll start wrapping it up soon, but do you have any advice for our up and coming developers or designers? We're about to start phase 1, which is where the meat of the work really starts happening. So any advice to like keep it going for the next 6 months or so, I think? Yeah, we have, right? 5 to 6 months.
Absolutely. So I have 2 things. Number 1 is figure out how you learn. I think we talked about it earlier. That's probably the most effective use of your time, because Alex can be talking the best gold, spitting the best knowledge about coding, but if he's not talking in a way that you understand, you may not receive it. So if you need to maybe read his transcriptions of what he said in the Zoom meeting or read a book to go along with what he said, you have to find out what works best for you so that you can retain the knowledge. And then secondly is, I say a lot, which is just fail early, learn often. Typically, the best way to learn something in software development is to actually just get your hands on it. It's really easy to listen to software development and like click through a bunch of course material, but you typically get the learnings when you code an error and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never doing that again, or you miss a semicolon and you're looking for it for 3 hours. So yeah, getting that hands-on practice and developing muscle memory is what's going to make coding stick for you.
Yeah, debugging is huge. I think you hit another little jewel there, where we spend a lot of time wondering why our code is not working more often than why it is working.
Absolutely,
and that's part of the developer process, is really trying, learning how to read error messages, learning how to scan through the code that you've written, and look for things that might be causing those errors. Yeah, that's a big. It could be a big time dump
always
sometimes.
like a semicolon or something. That's always
misspelled
the good old
word.
semicolon. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times I think like it's a fault in my logic or something, but a lot of the times it is missing a semicolon, or it is like misspelling a word or importing the wrong package or whatnot. So
it's a pain that no textbook could ever describe to you, and you have to go through it yourself to understand its importance.
For sure, and you get better at it as you continue to work and go through that process.
Absolutely, definitely gets easier as you go.
All right, a couple more questions. I'm sorry, Alex.
Oh, it's okay. I was just gonna say we have a couple more questions. I was gonna say the same thing. Go ahead.
Someone wants, if you can expand on what you mean by communicating your solution when you were talking about LeetCode.
Sure. So the goal of an interview, well, the goal that you may think is to solve the problem correctly in the most efficient way possible. That's one of the things you're being judged on, but not the only thing you're being judged on. They want to know how you think and how you break down problems. So while you're coding and outlining how you're going to attack the problem, they want to know that. That's just as important as finding the solution. Kind of like going back to school and teachers are like, show your work. That counts for 50% of the interview, somewhere around 50%.
All right, and we have another question about your brother, your older brother. Did he inspire you to work in tech?
He did, yeah. His name's Josiah. He's my eldest of 4 brothers, and he was working in tech a little bit before I was, maybe like 5 or 6 years. And we didn't really talk too much, so I knew that he like wrote code, but I had no idea what that entailed, the lifestyle it came with. And one winter, I visited him and he explained to me that he got free chocolate milk at work. And I was like, that is the craziest thing that I ever heard, unlimited free chocolate milk. And so that also prompted me to start looking into software development as, I mean, they have free chocolate milk on tap. Crazy.
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, hey, whatever motivates you. Uh, the course, you mentioned Cold Steel a lot. Is it the web developer bootcamp from Cold Steel?
That's the one. I believe it just was redone in 2021. So it has like fresh new variables, fresh new consts and lets and whatnot.
Yeah, the updates are great. I actually went through it because I had a few friends who were going through the course as well, and I wanted to help them out with some of the projects. And all the updates have been pretty amazing on that. And
yeah,
it seems like he's planning on keeping that up to date because it's anybody who's like a self-taught developer, I think, knows this course. It's like talked about in forums and everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a great compliment to what you guys are doing here in this boot camp. So I couldn't recommend it enough.
He also has a YouTube channel that has like a bunch of nuggets of knowledge that isn't behind a paywall. So if you ever want to just like listen to a really good instructor explain a difficult problem, his YouTube channel is a great resource as well.
With a good sense of humor. And
to piggyback off of that, like I would say I'm a person coding and all that is not, it's hard for me to focus. My husband talks code to me and I'm yawning every time he speaks. But I have to say Cult, I love you husband, but Cult, he's easy to, he explains it in a way where it makes sense. It's easy to follow along. I'm not trying to sell Cult's product here, but it is very, very helpful in how he teaches some of the programming that, I mean, I only got as far as HTML and CSS, but that was a lot for me.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. How do you feel about titles like inspiring developer or student developer when looking, I guess, when either on LinkedIn or looking for work?
I don't think it adds any value to your search. And I don't think it's too disingenuous to say software developer. If you're developing software, just call yourself a software developer. If you're in school to be a designer and you design something, you're a designer. You might not be a senior designer, but you're a designer. So I would definitely get rid of that part because it's going to hurt you in your job hunt.
All right. Any other questions? I don't see.
Yeah, I have a question. What are some emerging technologies or some newer technologies that you kind of have your eye on?
I'm glad you asked. Dino is actually pretty cool. That's what Slack is an early adopter of Dino. Dino is a modern runtime environment for JavaScript and TypeScript. It's kind of like Node, but done better. The same person who created Node created Dino. Yeah, so it has a little bit of extra things that he wish he would have created and added to Node.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that Slack was running on that. That's cool.
Yeah, our next generation platform is runs on Dino, so we get to learn it and teach it, which is great.
Yeah, that's exciting. And what type of development do you find yourself gravitating toward? Front end, back end? What is your thing? Like if you wanted to just sit down and code for fun tonight, what would you be doing?
Yeah, so I've done front end, I've done full stack, and I definitely enjoy front end more and more front end work. When I first picked up programming, I picked up a Python book and it was really fun to do a for loop and something like that, but it would be in the terminal. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm making a tic-tac-toe game in the terminal. But when I transitioned over to JavaScript, I was able to see the output of my code and it was very rewarding. So I like to see what I'm coding and have that represented and graphics and HTML and divs and moving buttons.
Yeah, I love that. I think I'm the same way too. We have another question here. What do you think about a new developer documenting their journey like you did to get out there?
Yeah, so actually, one of my moderators from my Discord community, he asked me like, hey, how do I start? And I think that it's great to, if you want to start documenting your journey, that's going to help you. And it's going to be really cool to look back on after you're in your job. But I recommend if you're comfortable with video, TikTok is a great place to start just because how low effort it is to flip a camera around. I believe my moderator's channel of him just like talking about what he learned every day is up to like 3,000 followers in a couple of months. So that's amazing for him because one of those 3,000 followers may be someone who has a referral link to like a new job. So that's amazing. But also, yeah, there's no harm in getting started with documenting your journey, whether that be video, written blog post, or just telling a friend next door.
Job wise, I'm sorry.
Oh, go
Job
ahead.
wise, when we talking about front end, back end, or full stack, where do you see or do you know where like more positions are available, or is it because sometimes when I'm looking at the trying to come up with data for our participants, I see a lot of full stack. Usually I see front end combined with either UI or UX.
Mhm.
So what's your experience out there as far as, jobs and the probability of getting a job, either front end, back end, full stack?
I'm not sure if I have any like hard data, but from what I saw when I was searching for a job was that it's pretty even across the board. I could be wrong, but from what I see, a company can call it anything they want. They can call you a software engineer and you get there and they're like, okay, I'm great that you know JavaScript, but we're going to need you to fix the database. And you're like, what? So typically what I'm seeing is like a lot of companies value the aptitude to learn how to pick up a software, a programming language, or a framework more than the technology that you already know. Am I right on that, Alex?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you'll get hired for one thing and then get asked to do another thing. And the ambiguous terms like software engineer, software developer, that could mean a variety of things. Sometimes you see very specific, front end developer UI UX experience, like you were saying, Lorraine. But a lot of times it's really ambiguous job descriptions.
For those
With
mega
a million
companies.
Technologies. Yeah.
For
And
the
they'll
huge
list like
companies.
20 different technologies.
Yeah, that's basically how it is.
Or it's like a senior level position, but they call it entry level. One of
Oh,
those.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, LinkedIn's going
Always.
crazy about that right now.
Absolutely. Another thing I wanted to mention was that like knowing people is super helpful. Like I feel like I knew how to be a successful developer advocate, but when I was applying, I went through the job portals as you would when you're applying for a job, and I got auto rejected from every single job that I applied to. And then I like flipped the switch and I was like, this isn't working. So I used like my social media abilities, my ability to make videos, and I made a tweet saying like, hey, it's a video tweet, but I was like, hey, this is everything I can do, everything that I've done. Is anybody hiring? And that was so much more beneficial than going through like portals, because real people know what they need. And sometimes like the websites aren't always up to date. So I was able to not only find a bunch of jobs that were hiring, but also skip the line and like go directly into the interview process because I was talking directly to a hiring manager. So knowing people and getting referrals is a great way to skip the line.
That's great. And just really leveraging your strengths, which was, making videos and using that to your advantage.
Right. My brother also, I showed him a new website just in case like he ever was looking around. And it's called blind.com, and it's a anonymous portal that like Google engineers, Twitter engineers, all types of people in tech can communicate and be like, hey, I'm looking for a job at Google. Does anyone have any referrals? And the people at Google, they want to give you a referral because they give you a bonus. And so it's like a win-win situation and a kind of a community of people helping each other out.
Oh, good to know. In your opinion, is it better to go after an apprenticeship than a job when you have very little experience or no work experience? Maybe somebody after this boot camp.
I think apprenticeships are amazing, and typically in tech, they pay pretty well. I've seen like design apprenticeships offer anywhere from like 60 to 75 for an apprenticeship, which is amazing. And they're also more reserved for people who don't necessarily have traditional backgrounds or don't have a year of experience. So it limits the pool of people applying for that job and people that are actually allowed to apply for that job. So if you find yourself in the opportunity to land an apprenticeship, definitely go for it, because getting your foot in the door is like 90% of the hardest part of like getting into tech.
Jeremiah, you're frozen again a little bit.
I'm switching
There you
cameras
go.
after this.
Could you explain a little bit about front-end design? Someone's asking, do front-end designers write code?
It depends on the company. If you're like at a startup and they offer a position as like a front-end designer, just really check the job requirements and what's expected of you, as you may be designing and coding. But typically for most companies, if they have the resources, you have a product designer, and then you have a front-end engineer to create, like, make their designs come to life with code.
Okay. Given the tech layoffs that we've been seeing a lot, do you think, and the hiring freezes, do you think things are a little more competitive right now?
I would think so, just because of the amount of engineers that have been released into the wild, and that's more people going after fewer jobs. But back to what I said about apprenticeships, there's only a few people that qualify for apprenticeships or internships, and those typically, hopefully, result in a return offer. And the people that are being let go already have like experience being a software engineer or designer, so they're most likely not going to be going after entry-level positions.
Yeah,
So
and
yes and
I
no.
also think, yeah, I think it's going to be competitive for a little while, but you know, the world revolves around software, and it's just a matter of time where you know, the tech world is going to be needing a lot more developers again. So this is just a temporary thing.
I agree. Yeah.
All right. I guess let's be respectful of your time, and it is almost 9 o'clock. Well, 9 o'clock on my time. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. It's been a pleasure, and I love seeing your journey from just a year ago until now, and I look forward to watching your YouTube videos. So thank you again for all your input and advice. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the wonderful questions. This was super fun. Hopefully I'll come back next year. Maybe it's like a recurring trend where I come back
Yeah,
once a year.
we'll make it an annual
That
thing.
sounds like a great
Absolutely.
idea.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
Yeah,
I love
pleasure
it.
talking with you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. I will update you on Slack. Thank you to Jeremiah again, and I'll post some of his, I posted socials before. You had his Discord, his YouTube, his TikTok. I'll post all of that again on Slack for anybody who wants to follow along. All right, have a wonderful night, everyone.